Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today I want to talk about something happening inside the American right. Something big, something deep, and honestly, something a lot of people don't fully understand. It's not just about Trump or 2028 or whatever headline dominates the news cycle this week. There's this massive argument happening on the right. On one side, the old school conservatives, the people who talk about principles, Burke, constitutionalism, small government, the Federalist Papers, all of that. On the other side, a younger, energized, angry, deeply frustrated group of people who feel abandoned, ignored, lied to, and they're ready to burn the whole system down. And I'm not exaggerating. If you spend even 10 minutes on certain parts of the internet, Telegram channels, TikTok political corners, certain subreddits, edgy podcasts, you'll hear things that sound less like conservatism and more like nihilism. A tear-it-all-down mentality. A distrust of everything. Institutions, traditions, heroes, churches, the whole deal. Some are even turning historical villains into memes. Some treat the founding fathers like naive boomers who didn't understand real power. Others call Reagan a neoliberal globalist, call Churchill a war criminal, and treat the entire conservative tradition as some giant scam. And here's the thing. This shift isn't just a vibe. It's a real political crisis, not only for the right, but for America as a whole. So today, I want to break down what's going on, not as a partisan, but as someone who cares about how a free society survives. Let's be honest. People don't wake up one morning and decide to become nihilists. They don't suddenly look at centuries of Western civilization and say, yeah, all of that was a mistake. Let's start from zero. That kind of mood, that desire to flip the table, comes from pain. It comes from feeling like the world changed and nobody in power cared. Think about the last 20 years. Entire industries moved overseas. Wages stagnated. Communities hollowed out. Fentanyl flooded the country. The media became tribal. Universities became ideological factories. Big tech gained godlike power. Meanwhile, the elites, the political class, the academic class, the media class, kept saying everything was fine. So it shouldn't shock anyone that younger conservatives are angry. Not annoyed, angry. They feel betrayed by the establishment, GOP, corporations, universities, the media, government agencies, even by traditional conservative thinkers who seem out of touch with the current moment. So when they hear words like prudence, tradition, constitutional norms, slow incremental change, they hear, we'll fix it later, stop complaining, and they don't buy it anymore. Here's the danger. The big one. When a movement loses its guiding principles, it becomes all emotion and no vision. And emotion, especially anger, is a terrible compass. That's why some young right-wing influencers drift into conspiracy theories, or weird historical revisionism, or edgy authoritarian fantasies. It's not because they love cruelty or chaos. It's because they're desperate for a worldview that feels powerful and clear. When life feels unstable, people want certainty. They want a story that makes sense out of the chaos. And if traditional conservatism doesn't provide that anymore, or if it feels too abstract, too polite, too disconnected from real suffering, they'll go find answers somewhere else, sometimes in places that lead nowhere good. One of the most worrying trends right now is this idea that everything the right believed for 50, 100, 200 years is wrong. Everything needs to be overturned. That's not conservatism. That's not populism. That's not reform. That's nihilism. You see it when people casually say things like, the founding fathers were weak. The Constitution is outdated. Reagan ruined America. Western civilization is a lie. Democracy is fake. Just embrace power. Some even flirt with supporting historical villains because they think it's edgy or anti-establishment. This is what happens when a movement forgets where it came from. Traditional conservatives weren't perfect. they made big mistakes, especially on economic policy and foreign policy. But the core of the conservative tradition was built on something beautiful and strong: ordered liberty, natural rights, moral responsibility, the dignity of the person, the importance of community, skepticism of centralized power, belief in gradual, responsible reform, faith that freedom requires virtue. Throwing all of that away because the modern world sucks is like burning your house down because the roof leaks. You don't destroy the foundation, you repair it. Now let me be clear, populism is not the enemy. In fact, populism is often necessary. Why? Because entrenched elites, whether left or right, tend to drift away from the people they claim to represent. Populism is a corrective force. It's the public yelling back, "Hey, you forgot about us." Historically, populism has helped break up monopolies, expand voting rights, challenge corrupt political machines, push back against technocratic overreach. So, populism can be healthy. It can wake up a stale political system. But here's the catch. When populism loses its moral grounding, when it becomes just rage without direction, then it becomes destructive. It becomes tear it all down instead of fix what's broken. It becomes performative rebellion without responsibility. A movement without virtue will eventually destroy itself. This isn't just philosophy. The founders talked about this all the time. James Madison said, "We need government because men are not angels, but no system can work if the people themselves have no virtue." John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people." They weren't saying society must be perfect. They were saying freedom only works if people can govern themselves. If citizens have no self-control, then the state eventually imposes control for them. That's why every stable free society, ancient or modern, depended on family structure, shared moral codes, religious or philosophical grounding, community norms, a sense of responsibility, not because the state forces it, but because people choose it. When those things erode, you don't get new freedom, you get social chaos, and chaos always invites authoritarianism. The American right cannot afford to forget this. Let's be blunt. For years, the right has been stuck in reaction mode. The left pushes a new cultural revolution. The right says, "Stop it." Universities adopt a new ideology. The right complains about it. Tech companies censor speech. The right says, "That's unfair." But complaining isn't a strategy. Yelling no isn't a vision. And reacting is not the same as governing. If the right wants to rebuild the country, really rebuild it, it needs more than anger. It needs a direction. It needs a moral framework. It needs leaders who can say not just what they're against, but what they're for. I think there are 5 pillars the right needs to reclaim. 1. A belief in moral order, not theocracy, not purity tests, just the understanding that a free society requires virtue. 2. A respect for inherited wisdom, not blind worship of the past, but humility toward what older generations learned the hard way. 3. A sane concept of freedom. Freedom is not do whatever you want. Freedom is the ability to pursue what is good within the structure of responsibility. 4. A commitment to community. Families, churches, local institutions, neighborhoods. If these things collapse, the nation collapses. 5. A rejection of nihilism. If the right embraces the same burn everything down energy that the radical left used, then the country becomes a bonfire with no firefighters left. The right can and should critique liberalism. Modern liberalism lost its balance. It drifted into relativism, hyper-individualism, bureaucratic technocracy, and identity tribalism. But the answer isn't to abolish freedom. It's to rebuild freedom on stronger ground. What would that look like? A country where freedom has purpose, where opportunity is real, where institutions serve the public, not themselves, where community matters, where the culture rewards responsibility, not cynicism. where differences are debated, not silenced, where liberty and virtue reinforce one another instead of tearing each other apart. This isn't naive, it's necessary. Every successful civilization did some version of this. Every failed one lost it. One of the biggest mistakes the new nihilistic right makes is assuming the founding fathers were weak. No, these people weren't soft. They fought an empire. They built a republic in a world full of kings. They created a system that lasted nearly 250 years, longer than almost any major republic in history. And they didn't do it by rejecting everything that came before them. They didn't say, burn it all down and start from zero. They did something wiser. They inherited, adapted, refined, and improved. That's what a mature movement does. That's what a healthy society does. Here's my core argument today. If nothing else sticks, populism provides the energy. Conservatism provides the wisdom. When you combine the two, you get renewal. When you separate them, you get chaos. The energy of populism is real and justified, but energy needs guidance. Otherwise, it turns into destruction. The wisdom of conservatism is real and essential, but wisdom without energy becomes irrelevant. The goal shouldn't be old right versus new right, populists versus conservatives, trads versus post-liberals. The goal should be a fusion, a movement that is grounded but not stale, passionate but not reckless, strong but not cruel, free but not chaotic, moral but not moralistic, innovative but not revolutionary in the destructive sense. That's the path forward. So here we are. America is heading into one of the most turbulent decades in its history. And on the right, there's a choice. Option 1, the path of anger, cynicism, and nihilism. It feels powerful. It feels bold. It feels honest. But it leads to destruction, historically, philosophically, politically. Option 2, the path of renewal. Not the old conservative establishment, not blind trust in institutions, not Pollyanna optimism, but a new conservatism that understands why people are angry, channels that anger into purpose, respects our civilization's inheritance, rebuilds what's been broken, and restores freedom by grounding it in virtue. That's not weakness. That's not boomer conservatism. That's leadership. And America desperately needs it. Look, the country is in trouble. Everyone knows that. The question isn't whether anger is justified. It is. The question is whether we choose anger that destroys or anger that rebuilds. If the right wants to save this country, and I think it can, then it has to stop flirting with nihilism and start rediscovering the deeper moral, cultural, and spiritual sources that made America possible in the first place. Not to go backwards, but to build something stronger going forward. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if you disagree. See you in the next one.